In the middle of the 19th century, the United States of America was still a young country, but it was already becoming one of the largest and most powerful nations on Earth. Its borders were expanding westward, its population was growing quickly, its cities were getting bigger, its factories more numerous, and its influence more visible every year. But beneath this growth, the country was deeply divided. Two different societies had formed inside the same nation. In the northern states, the economy was built mainly on factories, trade, railroads, and small farms. Slavery existed in some northern states in the past, but by the 1800s it had mostly disappeared. More and more people in the North believed slavery was morally wrong, or at least believed it should not be allowed to spread any further. In the southern states, the economy depended heavily on agriculture, especially cotton, tobacco, and sugar. These crops were grown on large plantations, and those plantations depended almost entirely on enslaved labor. For the southern states, slavery was not just a social system, it was the foundation of their economy and their way of life. For decades, these two systems existed together inside the same country, but the tension between them never stopped growing. Every time a new state was added to the Union, the same question returned. Would it be a free state or a slave state? Each side feared that if the other gained too much power in Congress, it would be able to decide the future of the entire country. Compromises were made, laws were passed, old arguments were delayed but never solved. By the 1850s, it was clear that the country was moving toward a crisis. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. He did not promise to immediately end slavery everywhere, but he was very clear about one thing: slavery would not be allowed to expand into new territories and states. To many in the South, this felt like the beginning of the end. They believed that if slavery could not expand, it would eventually be surrounded, weakened, and destroyed. They also believed that the federal government was slowly taking away the rights of the states. One by one, southern states began to leave the Union. They declared that they were no longer part of the United States and formed a new country called the Confederate States of America. By early 1861, 11 states had joined this new Confederacy. The United States was now split in two. The question was no longer whether there would be a conflict. The question was when the fighting would begin. It began in April 1861 at a place called Fort Sumter, a United States military fort in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina. Confederate forces demanded that the fort surrender. When it did not, they opened fire. For hours, cannons roared across the harbor. No one was killed in that battle, but the meaning was clear. The war had begun. Across both North and South, men rushed to enlist. Many believed the war would be short. Some thought it would be over in a few months. They were wrong. The two sides were very different. The Union in the North had more people, more factories, more railroads, and more ships. It had a stronger economy and more resources. The Confederacy in the South had fewer factories and less industry, but it was fighting on its own land, and many of its officers were experienced and confident. At first, the war went badly for the Union. In July 1861, the two armies met near a place called Bull Run. Many civilians came to watch, believing it would be a simple and almost entertaining event. Instead, the Union Army was defeated and forced to retreat in confusion. It was now clear to everyone that this war would not be quick or easy. As the months passed, the fighting spread across a huge area, from Virginia in the east to the Mississippi River in the west. New weapons made the war far more deadly than any previous American conflict. Rifled muskets and artillery could kill at longer distances and with greater accuracy. Old battlefield tactics no longer worked, but it took time for generals to understand this. The result was slaughter. In 1862, the Battle of Antietam became the single bloodiest day in American history. Thousands of men were killed or wounded in just a few hours. Fields and roads were covered with bodies. Hospitals were overwhelmed. Many wounded soldiers lay for days without proper care. The scale of death shocked the nation, but the war continued. In the West, Union forces slowly began to gain control of the Mississippi River, cutting the Confederacy in two and weakening its ability to move men and supplies. In the East, the fighting was brutal and often unclear, with victories and defeats on both sides. By 1863, the war had already lasted far longer than anyone expected. That year, President Lincoln made one of the most important decisions in American history. He issued the Emancipation Proclamation. This declared that enslaved people in the Confederate States were now free. In practical terms, it did not immediately free all slaves, but it changed the meaning of the war forever. The war was no longer only about preserving the Union. It was now also a war to end slavery. Later in 1863, the two main armies met again in a small town in Pennsylvania called Gettysburg. For 3 days, they fought one of the largest and bloodiest battles ever seen in North America. Tens of thousands were killed or wounded. At the end of the battle, the Confederate Army was forced to retreat. It never again launched a major invasion of the North. Gettysburg marked a turning point. From this moment on, the Confederacy was slowly being pushed back.
But the war was far from over. In 1864, Union General Ulysses S. Grant took command of all Union armies. His strategy was simple and brutal. Keep attacking, never give the Confederate armies time to recover, and use the Union's greater resources to wear them down. At the same time, General William Sherman marched through the South, destroying railroads, factories, warehouses, and supplies. His goal was not just to defeat Confederate armies, but to destroy the South's ability to continue the war. Cities burned, rail lines were torn up, fields were ruined. By 1865, the Confederacy was exhausted. Its armies were shrinking, its supplies were gone, its people were starving. In April 1865, Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrendered to General Grant at a place called Appomattox Courthouse. Other Confederate armies soon surrendered as well. The war was over. It had lasted 4 years. About 620,000 soldiers had been killed. Many more were wounded or permanently disabled. Cities, farms, and entire regions were devastated. Shortly after the war ended, President Lincoln was assassinated. The country had survived, but it was deeply wounded. Slavery was now officially abolished in the United States. The Union had been preserved, but the struggle over how the country would rebuild and how formerly enslaved people would be treated was only beginning. The American Civil War was not just a war between two armies. It was a war that decided what kind of nation the United States would be, and its effects are still felt today.